In 2025, 57% of Americans said they were living paycheck to paycheck, or some of them were making over $90,000 a year. That is not an income problem. Something else is happening in between the paycheck and the bill. Here's what most people over 40 believe. They believe that if they just made more money, the tightness would finally ease up. But look at what actually happens. Higher earners hit the exact same squeeze as everyone else. They just hit it a few years later at a higher number. The math was supposed to work by now. It does not. So what is actually different between the people who feel behind and the people who do not when they are cashing checks for the same amount? That question sits underneath everything in this video, and the answer lands before we are done. Here is the short version. It comes down to what happens to your paycheck in the first 15 seconds after it lands, and almost nobody controls that moment on purpose. Skip it, and you are not just leaking a little cash. You are quietly pushing your own retirement further away, one automatic decision at a time. My name is Alex. If you have ever stared at your account balance the week before payday and wondered where a solid income went, stay with me, because the fix has nothing to do with earning more. I'm going to show you the exact order your paycheck should move in and a window in the tax code built specifically for people your age. Once you understand this, you stop reacting to your bank account and start directing it. And that 15-second window is exactly where this starts. The 15-second decision nobody notices. Here's a strange fact about money. The moment it arrives, your brain already has plans for it and you were never consulted. There's a concept called mental accounting, and it explains a lot about why solid incomes still disappear. It means your brain sorts money into categories based on how it feels, not what it actually is. Tax refund money feels like a bonus, even though it was your own income the whole time. A paycheck feels safe to spend the second it lands, even before a single bill gets paid. Your brain isn't doing math here, it's doing storytelling, and that story starts fast. Financial researchers have found that people start mentally spending money within about 15 seconds of seeing it hit their account. 15 seconds. That's barely enough time to read the notification, let alone think it through. By the time you've decided what that money is for, you've usually already decided wrong. Let me show you how this actually plays out. Take Danielle, a 53-year-old pharmaceutical sales rep in Charlotte, North Carolina. She brings home about $14,000 a month before taxes. 2 years ago, she leased a 2024 Mercedes-Benz GLE 450 for $890 a month. On paper, that felt completely reasonable. She could afford the payment. Her credit was excellent. The dealership approved her instantly, but here's what that 15-second decision actually cost her. That $890 a month is over $10,000 a year. Money that never touched a retirement account, never sat in a high-yield savings account earning close to 4%, and never had the chance to compound. It just left. Every single month on autopilot before she'd even had breakfast. Now, I'm not saying Danielle made a foolish choice. I'm saying she made an automatic one. And automatic is exactly the problem because nobody sits down and consciously decides, I would like my retirement to arrive 2 years later than it needs to. That decision gets made by default 15 seconds at a time, thousands of times over a career. You're probably thinking, okay, but everyone budgets a little loosely sometimes. And sure, that's true. But this isn't about one splurge. It's about a pattern that repeats every single payday invisibly for decades. That's the part that makes it dangerous. Small leaks don't feel like leaks. They feel like normal life. So here's the real question underneath all of this. If your brain is already deciding where your paycheck goes before you've thought about it, who's actually in charge of your money? Right now, for most people, the honest answer is nobody. The paycheck just moves and life absorbs it. That's the whole reason a routine matters more than a budget. A budget assumes you'll make good decisions in the moment. A routine takes the moment away entirely, but before you can build that routine, you need to know exactly what you're working with. Not what you think you spend, what you actually spend on the things you genuinely can't live without. And that starts with a number most people have never actually calculated for themselves. Your real baseline and why it moved. Try this test. Add up everything you spent last month and then try to explain out loud why each dollar had to leave your account. You'll get through the mortgage fine, the insurance fine, and then you'll hit a subscription you forgot you had, and the explanation gets a lot shakier. That's the gap between a need and a disguised want, and almost nobody has drawn that line honestly. A true need is something you cannot function without: housing, basic groceries, insurance, the utilities that keep the lights on. A disguised want is something that feels required because you've paid it so many times it stopped registering as a choice. Take Kathleen, a 49-year-old hospital administrator outside Austin, Texas. Household income of around $160,000 a year. Kathleen would tell you without hesitation that she lives well within her means, and by a lot of measures she does. But when she actually itemized her month, she found 6 different streaming and subscription services, a standing weekly delivery order from a local steakhouse, and a Coach Tabby shoulder bag she'd financed through a buy now, pay later app, 4 payments of $96 each. None of it felt like overspending in the moment. Added up, though, and it came to just over $9,000 a year, quietly filed under normal life. Here's the part that makes this stage of life different. If you're in your late 40s or 50s, your baseline probably shifted without you noticing, and not because you got careless. Maybe your mortgage is finally almost paid off, which should free up cash, except property taxes and insurance in most parts of the country have climbed enough to eat that gain. Maybe you've got a college kid still on your phone plan and your car insurance. Maybe there's a parent nearby who needs a little help some months, and that help has quietly become a line item, not a favor. None of that shows up in an old budget. It just shows up in your bank account doing damage you can't quite trace. So, how do you actually find your baseline? Add up the true bare minimum costs of existing: housing, food at home, utilities, insurance, minimum debt payments, any recurring support you genuinely can't walk away from. That total is your number, and here's the target you're aiming for. Your essential costs should sit under 50% of your take home pay. Now, if you ran that math and you're above 50%, don't panic and don't assume you failed. It usually means one of two things. Either your fixed costs, especially housing, have genuinely outgrown your income, which is a real and common problem right now, given how much insurance and property taxes have climbed in the last couple of years. Or more often, some of what you're calling a need is actually a want, wearing a disguise. And look, I'm not saying cut the steakhouse order or the Coach bag entirely. I'm saying know what it is. A conscious splurge and an invisible leak spend the same dollar completely differently over 20 years. Once you know your real baseline, something interesting happens. You finally know what surviving actually costs you. And once you know that number, you can see the gap between it and your income clearly for the first time, instead of guessing at it every month. That gap is what everything else in this video gets built on, because before you can protect yourself from the next emergency, you need to know exactly how much protection you actually need. The safety net math changes after 45. Quick question. If your car broke down tomorrow or you lost your job next month, how many months could you actually cover your bills without touching a credit card? A lot of people my age used to think 6 months was overkill. Now I'd argue it might not even be enough. Recent survey data on financial safety nets is not encouraging. Currently, a large majority of Americans over 3 and 4 say they have little to no cushion left over each month, and roughly 1 in 5 say they have nothing left over at all once the bills are paid. That's not a Gen Z problem or a starter job problem. That number cuts across income levels, including people who look from the outside like they've got it together. Here's why this matters more once you're past 45 than it did at 25. When you're young, a layoff is a setback. You bounce, you find something new, you've got decades to recover the lost ground. But job searches tend to stretch out longer the further along you are in your career, partly because there are fewer open roles at senior salary levels, and partly because hiring managers are, frankly, sometimes hesitant about the cost of an experienced hire. So the same emergency that used to cost you 3 months of income can now cost you 6, 8, sometimes longer. And there's a second pressure most 25-year-olds simply don't have. Take Robert, a 56-year-old operations manager in Tampa, Florida. He's got a daughter in her sophomore year at the University of Florida. Tuition and housing running him about $11,000 a semester. And he's also started quietly covering his mother's supplemental insurance premium, about $340 a month, since she moved into a senior community nearby. Robert isn't in crisis. He's just squeezed from both directions at once, a kid still needing support and a parent starting to need it too. If Robert lost his job tomorrow, his safety net isn't just covering his own mortgage anymore. It's covering 2 other households that quietly depend on his paycheck. So here's the honest answer for what your safety net actually needs to be. If you're in this stage of life, 3 to 6 months of your baseline expenses is the old rule, and it's still a fine floor. But if you've got a kid in college, an aging parent, or a job in a field where senior roles are slower to fill, I'd push that closer to 9 months, maybe even a full year, sitting somewhere fully liquid. That might sound excessive until you remember what it's actually protecting. It's not protecting a vacation or a new watch. It's protecting your ability to say no to a bad decision under pressure, like rating a retirement account early or running up a credit card at today's rates just to survive a rough stretch. And where should that money actually sit? Not in a regular checking account earning next to nothing, and definitely not in the stock market where it could lose value right when you need it most. A high yield savings account currently paying somewhere around 4% keeps it safe, liquid, and at least keeping pace with inflation instead of quietly losing value while it waits. Here's the thing about a safety net, though. It only protects you from emergencies. It does nothing about the debt you're already carrying. And at today's interest rates, that debt is working against you every single day you don't deal with it, killing debt before the clock runs out. Here's a number that should bother you. If you're carrying a credit card balance right now, the interest rate on it is probably higher than it's been in years, and it's working against you every single day you don't deal with it. The average credit card interest rate currently sits around 23%, not 23% over the life of the loan, 23% a year, compounding on whatever you haven't paid off. That's not a fee. That's a wealth transfer moving steadily from your account to the banks every single month, whether you notice it or not. So let's talk about how you actually get out from under it. There are two competing strategies, and people argue about them constantly. The Avalanche method has you attack the debt with the highest interest rate first, while paying minimums on everything else. Mathematically, this is always the cheaper way out. The Snowball method has you attack the smallest balance first, regardless of its rate, because clearing out one account completely gives you a psychological win that keeps you motivated. Let me put real numbers behind this instead of just describing it. Take Denise, a 52-year-old school district administrator in Columbus, Ohio, carrying two balances. One card at $9,000 with a 24% rate, a second card at $3,500 at 18%. She can put $500 a month total toward both between minimums and extra payments. Using the Avalanche method, targeting that higher rate card first, Denise is completely debt-free in 34 months, and she pays about $4,324 in total interest along the way. Using the Snowball method, targeting the smaller balance first, she's debt-free in 35 months, and she pays roughly $4,788 in interest. That's one extra month and about $464 more just for paying off the smaller balance first instead of the more expensive one. On the surface, Avalanche wins clearly. So, why doesn't everyone just use it? Here's what the math doesn't account for. Personal finance is not actually a math problem. It's a behavior problem that happens to involve numbers. If knocking out that smaller balance first is the difference between Denise staying motivated for 35 months and giving up around month 6, then Snowball isn't the inferior strategy. It's the one that actually gets used, I'll be honest with you. I lean Avalanche because $464 is $464, and at these interest rates, every dollar you save on interest is a dollar that could be compounding somewhere else instead. But I've also watched people white knuckle their way through an Avalanche plan for a year, stall out, and end up worse off than if they just picked the method that kept them moving. The best plan is the one you actually finish. Either way, here's the real takeaway. That 18 to 24% you're paying on credit card debt isn't just expensive. It's actively competing with your retirement account for the same dollars, and right now, the debt is winning. Every month you're not paying that down is a month you're not able to put that same money somewhere. It could be working for you instead. And once that debt is gone, or even while you're working through it, there's a much bigger opportunity sitting right in front of people your age, one that most people never even realize they qualify for. The catch-up window. Here's something the tax code does that almost nobody talks about. Once you turn 50, the IRS quietly starts letting you put away more money than everyone else, tax advantaged, no strings attached. Most people never even check. It's called a catch-up contribution, and it exists specifically because Congress assumed people in their 50s would need to make up ground. This year, if you're under 50, you can put $24,500 into a 401k. Once you hit 50, that limit jumps to $32,500. The same rule applies to IRAs. Standard contributors get $7,500 a year. At 50 and up, that becomes $8,600. Nobody mails you a notice about this. You just have to know it exists. Take Teresa, a 51-year-old IT director in Raleigh, North Carolina, making around $140,000 a year. For years, she contributed enough to her 401k to get her employer match and called it a day. Reasonable, but she was leaving the single biggest advantage of her age bracket completely untouched. Let's actually run the numbers on what that extra room is worth. If Teresa maxes out just the catch-up portion, that extra $8,000 in her 401k and $1,100 in her IRA every year for the next 15 years until she's 66, and it grows at an average 8% annual return, here's where she ends up. That catch-up money alone, on top of everything else she's already contributing, grows to roughly $247,000. She'll have put in $136,500 of her own money over those 15 years. The other $110,000 is just growth, money she never had to earn twice. $247,000, that's not pocket change. That's the difference between retiring on schedule and working 3 extra years. That's a fully funded wedding for a kid, or the gap between a modest retirement and one where you're not recalculating your grocery budget every time gas prices move. It's also, frankly, the difference between window shopping a Rolex date just 41 in your 60s and actually being able to buy one without flinching. Now, you're probably thinking, that sounds nice, but I don't have an extra $9,000 a year just lying around. And fair, most people don't, not all at once, but remember the debt math from a minute ago. Once those balances are cleared, that $500 a month you were sending to a credit card company at 23% interest becomes $500 a month. You can redirect somewhere that's paying you instead of the other way around. The catch-up window doesn't require you to find new money, it just asks you to stop sending money you already have to the wrong place. Here's the order that actually makes sense. First, contribute enough to get your full employer match. That's an immediate guaranteed return before you do anything else. Next, use the expanded Roth IRA room because money that grows tax-free for another 15 years is worth more than money that gets taxed on the way out. Then push whatever's left back into the 401k catch-up space, and if you somehow max both out, a standard taxable brokerage account picks up the rest. The honest truth is, this window doesn't stay open forever. Every year you don't use it is a year of compounding you don't get back. But knowing where to put the money is only half of it. The other half is making sure it actually moves there every single time without you having to remember to do it. Automating. So willpower never has to show up. Quick thought experiment. Picture the version of you sitting on the couch at 9 p.m. on a Friday, completely wiped out from the week. Now ask yourself honestly, is that person going to log into 3 different accounts and manually move money around? Of course not. And that's exactly the moment this whole system is built to survive. There's a real psychological phenomenon behind this called decision fatigue. Every choice you make during the day, what to eat, what to answer in an email, whether to take the call, draws from the same limited pool of mental energy. By evening, that pool is running low, and that's precisely when people make their worst financial decisions. Not because they're careless people, because they're out of gas. Take Gregory, a 54-year-old logistics manager outside Denver, Colorado. Gregory isn't undisciplined, he's just busy, and by the time payday rolls around, his mental bandwidth is usually already spent on everything else. For years, his paycheck landed in his checking account and just sat there until bills pulled it out piece by piece with whatever was left over, drifting toward random spending. A new set of tailor-made Stealth 2 irons here, a last-minute upgrade to business class there. Nothing reckless, just money with no assignment, doing whatever felt good in the moment. Here's the fix. And it's less about willpower and more about architecture. The day your paycheck lands, before you've had a chance to make a single decision about it, automation takes over. Step 1. Your paycheck hits your main checking account, your home base. Step 2. An automatic transfer immediately moves your baseline number, the true needs figure from earlier, into a separate account that only exists to cover bills and essentials. Step 3, everything leftover routes automatically into your high yield savings account and your investment accounts. The ones doing the catch up work we just walked through, you never touch it. You never decide. It's already gone before decision fatigue gets a vote. Why does this matter so much right now specifically? Because leaving unallocated cash sitting in a regular checking account isn't neutral. It's actively losing value. Inflation is currently running close to 3% a year, and the average checking or basic savings account pays next to nothing, well under 1%. That gap means money just sitting there is quietly losing purchasing power every single month, even though the number on the screen never goes down. Meanwhile, a competitive high yield savings account is currently paying somewhere in the 4 to 5% range. Same dollar, two completely different outcomes, and the only difference is which account it's sitting in. I'll be straight with you. Automation isn't exciting. There's no clever trick here, no secret account, nothing you couldn't set up yourself in 20 minutes this weekend. But that's actually the point. The system doesn't need you to be motivated. It doesn't care if you had a great Monday or a terrible Friday. It moves the same way every single time, regardless of how you feel. And that consistency is worth more than any amount of willpower you could bring to the table manually. So here's where that leaves you. You know your baseline. You've built a real safety net. You're clearing debt with a plan instead of a guess. You're using a piece of the tax code most people your age never touch. And now the whole thing runs on its own the day the money lands without you lifting a finger. That's the system. What's left now is just deciding what you actually do with it. The money was never the problem. Here's the realization worth sitting with. You were never behind because you didn't earn enough. You were behind because your paycheck never had a job to do. The second it landed, and in that gap, 15 seconds at a time, it quietly decided for you. A few things worth carrying with you. Your baseline is a real number, not a guess, and it changes as your life does. A safety net has to match your actual risk, not some rule you read once. Debt at today's rates is competing directly with your future, and it's currently winning. The catch-up window closes the day you stop being eligible for it, and none of it holds without a system that runs whether you're motivated or not. So next payday, before you spend a single dollar, ask yourself one question. Where is this money about to go? And did I actually choose that? Or did 15 seconds choose it for me? That question doesn't end here either. Because once this system is running, a new one shows up. What happens to all of it the day you actually retire? That's worth its own conversation. If this shifted how you see your own paycheck, I'd genuinely like to hear where you landed. Talk soon.